Hey everybody, welcome back. We're in Dungeons and Dialectics again, and look at that, Victor has polymorphed. No, this is the great Ted Adams with Nerdarchist Ted, as you would know him. And we're going to be talking about D&D and getting a philosophical spin on everything. So we'll go into the topic and everything in just a moment, but I thought I'd let Nerdarchist Ted have the floor for a little bit just to talk. What's up,
Hey
man?
everybody. If you happen to like, talking about D&D or listen to other people talk about D&D, primarily 5th edition content, you can head over to, anywhere that you hear the term Nerdarchy. We're all over social media. We got the website and we got over 3,000 videos over on YouTube. So feel free to go check it out.
Yeah. Most of you are probably already aware of the Nerdarchist, but you never know. We might catch one or two. But I love the Nerdarchy guys. They're all wonderful people, and everybody that they're connected to is super awesome. But we're here talking about alignment today. Yeah, go
So
ahead.
alignment is one of those tricky subjects. It's really weird to be like, okay, I'm going to define all of my actions by this all-encompassing term of alignment. And I find it bizarre, especially the longer that I've played. And if you aren't familiar, with myself on the channel, it's one of those things that I've been gaming for decades, and I started in second edition. The other Nerdarchy guy, Dave, he started with first edition, and it was back then. It was crucial part of the game. It was tied to so many different things. But as we've played and as the editions have changed, it's kind of moved down this weird road. And in the early days, I've tried to look at like, oh well, there's this comic book character, and I'm going to associate them with this alignment for this and this alignment for that.
Which are very fun.
Absolutely. And I was like, okay, well, you've got, Captain America. Well, he's clearly lawful good. You've got, Cyclops that I see as more neutral good. You got Wolverine, who's more chaotic good. Sometimes he flips a little bit and goes chaotic neutral.
I think it was Matt Colville that was quoted for saying that in all of history of like literature and all media, there's no character that actually has a true alignment, with the exception of Finn from Adventure Time, who is quoting himself. He is in fact lawful good. Because you do get in those sticky situations, right, where it's just like, well, this action doesn't really look like it, right? So that gets in a huge conundrum. But what I want to drill down to, and the kind of the goal of this conversation and making everybody's game better, including ours and yours listening, is that let's talk about what we think the purpose of alignment is. I think we can get a lot of insight on how we game and how we can better that game by figuring out what that is for us. So what is the purpose of alignment to you?
All right, so in the current day of gaming, I use alignment to just kind of gather the group together and let them know what I'm looking for. So as a GM, personally, I want heroic players. I want to play a story where I expect that I don't have to worry about the overall actions of the players. Every once in a while, yeah, you might go down a dark road and you might do, something that's a little bit unexpected, but over the course of an entire campaign, you're going to do the right thing and you're going to progress the story. So from that perspective, it notifies the GM overall the kind of direction your character is going to do and allow you to present situations with an expected outcome.
Yeah, I like that. I really do like that. The idea that, to paraphrase you, and hopefully I'm not putting you in the wrong light, but it's almost as if alignment is a signal. Be like, hey, this is what we're looking for in a game. This is 9 times out of 10 what you can expect out of it, and we can have a conversation during session 0 or prior to that if we want something different. But here's what we have right now. And I'm like you. I like my heroic games. Not that I haven't done full quote unquote evil campaigns, and they can be fun. But if you want to do an arc, I think we were talking a little bit beforehand, doing arcs that are 50 sessions long.
Hmm.
Generally, just because I believe in the human psyche, that it's a lot easier to grasp onto a character that's good for that long.
Hmm.
Because otherwise it just gets so tiring being evil for that long, for me at least. So maybe other people are a little different.
None of the evil campaigns that I've been a player in have really gone to any serious length, because characters are going to turn on each
Yeah.
other. The good guys are going to win. However you want to look at it,
Yeah.
they've just never succeeded. And I as a DM, I just have never been inspired to try and run that kind of story. It's not me.
Yeah, no, and I totally get that. So for me, the purpose of alignment, and I'm gonna kind of go into this weird, and let me know. You're the one who's been in more editions than me, and you've been steeped in it a little bit longer. But my perception of this is more on a narrative and storytelling, and also a gamifications. What the purpose of alignment actually is. We see it in like the Uruk-hai of Lord of the Rings, and we see this in the Stormtroopers of the original trilogy. There's some questions to be had in the prequels and the new trilogy of really messing with this formula, but let's focus on 4, 5, and 6 when we're talking about Star Wars. But the idea that it makes your storytelling easier if you have a foe that is easily knocked down, and not by like skill of strength easily knocked down, but you have no moral obligation to care for this foe. It makes storytelling a lot easier. So having an alignment system where there is clearly lines, the orcs are always evil, the goblins are always evil. To me, that is and I kind of embrace this somewhat. I think I have kind of more of a new age idea behind it, but sometimes, man, when we're playing a game about combat, I mean, look at the player's handbook. It's got a lot of combat in there. Sometimes you just want to knock some people down without the moral weight on your shoulders. And I think that's the true purpose, just digging down deep into the foundation of alignment of why it's there. What do you think about that?
So, I mean, there's definitely a lot of, strong and valid points there. If I, as the player, if I don't have to question, then I don't have to get into that moral quandary of, do I draw my sword? Do I cast my spell? You have got a defined point of I can do this without any moral repercussions. If we go back, to where I started, in second edition, alignment was far more defined than it was now. You had XP penalties if you did actions that were outside of your alignment. And it was entirely up to your DM GM as to whether that was actually happening or not. What do they define as lawful? Oh, you're playing a chaotic good person, and you're obeying the laws in town. Well, is that breaking your alignment? That's kind of crazy.
Well,
You
and
know,
then
to
the question comes in. It's like, well, what if I'm in a drow city? Like, am I still lawful if I'm not taking slaves and killing people? And having that like almost like low focus on what
Yeah.
lawful means is that's when things get a little noodly.
And then from the classes perspective, some classes required, a specific portion of your alignment, or a entirely set alignment. If you're going to be
Yeah,
a paladin, you had to be lawful good, and
one
that
or
was just
two, one or two of the axes needed to be where it needed to
yeah.
go. Like monks, I think had to always be lawful, but paladins always had to be lawful good.
Right. I think druids always had to have some aspect of their alignment was neutral.
Hmm.
I don't think rogues or thieves were allowed to be lawful. Barbarians I think had to be chaotic.
Hmm.
You had I think that was a third edition term, because there wasn't barbarians in the second edition player's handbook, if I'm correct.
Yeah, I think back then it was still fighting men, but little different. Like kind of my research on old D&D is a little lacking in that area, but I get what you mean.
Fighting man and magician date back to
Yeah,
first ed.
I really wish we would have kept fighting man over fighter. I love it, but I guess I guess you got to be kind of a little bit more open. But what about the fighter women?
That is true. But from those requirements, it then said, okay, well, if you're going to play those kind of characters, then the DM knew, well, you have to do these. So I mean, this never happened in any of my games that I either played in or was a DM for, but I have heard tale of DMs who were enforcing the true neutral alignment that druids could possibly be, or had to be, depending upon the edition. And literally in the middle of the battle, when the tides turned, it's like, no, you need to change sides. You need to fight your allies, because you need to keep the balance. And I'm like, that is just insane to have anyone have that kind of a requirement based on this alignment structure.
Yeah, that's to me, a lot of those examples or a lot of those ideas were kind of alignment at its worst. And I played with a lot of venerable DMs and players when I started in 3.5, so some of that carried over the idea that you're not playing to your alignment. And I find we kind of touched on it a little bit, but the idea of alignment is very loose and almost like sand through the fingers if you try to put it on a civilization's base. I think the true strength of alignment is when it is only considered on a cosmological level. There is a constant war between whether you call them, gods or beings of other dimensions, these like all powerful beings of creation, that they are in struggle, and every action that you take reflects into your alignment and how you look to them when it comes on the pieces on the board for the cosmic war. And I think that's a really interesting and fun way, and makes that end of tier 3, tier 4 play more interesting than if you focused on alignment because you're lawful evil, so you can't enter my castle. I think it gives a little bit more meat to the later game if you think about alignment on a cosmic level.
So, I look at what's there, and I mean, those are definitely some good points. And as a tip to GMs out there, you could be making little, hash marks and notes as the game is going on. And when you get to those upper tiers, have those actions that you've already taken affect where the course of the game is going to go.
That's
So
how I do it.
definitely,
Yeah.
I definitely see that's an aspect. But when I look at the older editions and the spells, the requirements, and just the general view of the alignment, why do we not have people trained with the spell, detect evil, or detect good or evil, whatever. And it's like, hey, I can just sense when people are bad, and you know what, the magic says so I'm going to haul you in. You're going to do an evil act.
Yeah.
And that becomes society, if there is that kind of access, because detecting alignments has never been a high level power. It's level 1.
Yeah.
Like, you get right into it. So even if they're not out wandering the streets, it's like, hey, you've been brought in because you've been suspected of a crime, and we're gonna have you use magic or we're gonna have this person use magic, and they're gonna make the determination as to whether you're guilty or not based off of a single casting.
Yeah.
Or maybe they bring all the suspects in and they lock up everyone who radiates evil, by the one casting, because it's an area spell. It's not
Yeah.
just focused on one guy. So, like, the ramifications of a hardcore, you have an alignment that is your focus, and it radiates all the time, and access to those kind of spells, it would utterly change society. And none of the D&D worlds that I've read novels on or seen gaming books have ever gone into that kind of an aspect, because it's going down a rabbit hole that is just going to mega alter the game forever.
Well, and it's an interesting problem, right? Because, and I think this is kind of on the forefront, or maybe kind of like tossed away, no longer on the forefront. But when I think of alignment, I think about like the current renaissance that we're in when it comes to the tabletop role playing hobby, especially with D&D 5e. Is that we're in much more of a narrative arc in the gameplay style, that it's no longer just gamification, where in the 3.5 that was kind of like the height of gamification. And it was never really like downplayed early on, but 3.5 was like massive, like everything's gamified. But 5e, we've altered that, we've changed it, just in the cultural zeitgeist of the hobby. And I think the reason why alignment has kind of taken a back seat is because it has such a weird ramification that if you play hard on alignment, how much it affects, how much it ripples through the narrative, because you have the issue of not only is that considered constraining for players when they're making their characters, that they have to be so strict based on this alignment, and it's a more unflexible thing, or really it's only flexible in the eyes of the DM and their perception of things. But you also run into the issue of the narrative implications of, like can we touch on a little bit before? Like if I go kill these orcs, like it's not an evil act. I'm like I'm killing like the super known one that everybody kind of talks about is killing orc babies. Like is that an evil act? It's an evil creature. Like what do we do with that? So it brings up all these moral quandaries. But on top of that, like what do you do when a character, you go into a city and they have this ability to detect alignment, but it's a character who just a week ago he's like, you know what, I'm throwing away my bandit life and I'm gonna join the clergy. Like, is this like an off switch? Like, is intention the alignment, or is it the acts that he's for 10 years he's killed hundreds of people? Like, is he still evil, or is it because he said he wants to do this? Is he no longer evil?
So that actually comes down to the more granular aspects of alignment, and there are some DMs who have said, okay, you have a set alignment, and it takes time to make a change. But if in the earlier editions when you could cast a spell and really detect a person's alignment, you're gonna radiate whatever's on your sheet.
But
So
it's not really like a gradient. It's like there's no, you know what I mean? Like I guess
well,
maybe eventually you get to neutral, but
so like you have you have the plus sign that you can go up or down side to side, and with lawful good over here and chaotic evil over here. And if you want to be chaotic good, then you got to come this way, you got to come this way, whatever. And it took time and certain acts to actually move your alignment one step, but you could only move one piece at a time. So if you wanted to go from lawful good to chaotic good, then you had to move on that side to side spectrum. If you were doing too many evil acts, but you were good, you would begin moving your alignment down to neutral. And had you continued, you would move it down to neutral. Over the years that I've played, um, I've only ever forced an alignment change on somebody once, and it was just session after session where I just felt the character was just moving away from what he had presented to me at the beginning of him joining the game, and I really didn't like it. And I felt it was more of a catalyst for him to be like, well, I've already changed once, and I'm just going to go darker down this road. So like I wish I would have like just talked to him out of game and be like, hey, look, this is what I'm noticing. Is this something that you want to do? So like you really have to be careful when you are talking about alignments, because it can push things in the wrong direction.
so I guess that runs into the question right back to what our goal is, the purpose of alignment. Do you think the old style, and another reason why they've probably lost a little bit of favor, especially among the newer community, is that it's no longer working for its intended purpose of like being almost a flag for players to understand where the kind of the scatter plot of their actions should be, but instead ended up being more of a tool for a DM to kind of be like the meta hammer, be like you're not playing your character right, so I'm gonna bop you on the head. And instead of doing it in a meta sense where I'm changing your character sheet, could a DM not just have in-world consequences for your actions, that so we don't need this sliding scale of alignment, we don't need to gamify morality, when we could just simply say, oh, you broke the law, well now you go to jail. Like
Right.
that's the downside to breaking the law, not that oh, we've ticked you, you're neutral now because you broke the law. Like, at what point are we no longer using the purpose in this?
Well, I mean, the real example is, I mean, look at how many different role playing games are out there. How many of them have an alignment system to some degree or another? I guarantee you they don't. They don't all. Some things are just like, hey, you know what? Give me a qualifier. Give me a descriptor.
Yeah.
Tell me about your character.
If I'm not
Uh,
mistaken, I think D&D is the only one, but close to it, and unless there are people trying to capture the sense of D&D.
I think there's a couple other games out there that have something that would be along the same lines.
Akin to
But
it.
I mean, yeah, but I mean, I'm not familiar with every single game that's out there.
Yeah, obviously nor am I, so.
But when I look at Cipher System,
Mhm.
there's nothing about alignment. You just decide, what, I'm a this, and you're a adjective, noun, who, verbs, and you fill in those blanks with as much as you can, and they give you options and you can kind of adjust a little bit, but there's nothing that says, oh well, I'm the good guy or I'm the bad guy. So like I think D&D could very well, when we get to 6th or 7th edition, alignment might not be there at all because it's not really needed.
It's
you know
it's almost vestigial at this point. Like it's kind of we're carrying on because it's tradition, not because we are using it.
but I mean, to me, who have played, for this long, to see a paladin and them not have to be, lawful good, it still feels a little alien. It's like,
Yeah.
well, how do I play, a neutral evil paladin? Well, that's more like a dark paladin, so that's okay. But how do I play a true neutral paladin? How do I play a chaotic neutral paladin?
Yeah.
That just doesn't seem to go together. It's like, all right, I'll make a cleric and a fighter and merge them together, and but it's like, no, it's still a paladin. You're not worshiping a god. You're following an oath, and that oath, is going to give you where you need to go.
Yeah.
So
I think
it's
this,
weird.
I think this falls under what I class as kind of it's what my character would do kind of thing, and I think alignment really feeds that. But it also, in this weird aspect, has the DM have a little bit more of a hammer in that argument. And I've always found the argument of it's what my character would do to be very hollow. Because ultimately, if you take it to its logical conclusion, it's like, okay, well, that's a great point. Who made your character? And they're like, well, I did. And it's like, so you have absolute creative control over your characters. So you could write any reason for them to do anything, right? So why, and alignment seems to be something that's often used for this, in improv settings, they say yes and. Alignment tends to be a but no, or a no but situation. It's like, oh, well, I'm not going to participate in that because of my alignment. I'm not going to continue the story because of my alignment. And to me, my argument has always been like, yes and or yes but try to find a reason why your character would do it, because that shows your creativity and your skill as a player, that you're finding a reason to participate in it but making it interesting by playing off flaws and character discourse. If you can find a reason to do it and make it interesting at the same time, to me that's a really skillful player.
I do try to look at what's there, and um from a player perspective, there are a lot of times where the DM puts out a hook, and it's generally up to the players to get together and decide, are we going to do this hook, and if so, what is the reason? And I know this is slightly deviated from alignment, but you'll see how I loop back
No,
in.
I'm with it.
Uh,
I'm on racked into the roller coaster. Let's do this.
but when like I have a character, and in the party, there doesn't seem to be all of these great ties tying one another together. But because out of game, we know, well, all of us have decided, we're this adventuring party, we're going to do this. And because we've already adventured together before, I'm not going to go hire somebody else. I'm just going to go to the people who I've already gone on successful missions with before. So along the same lines, alignment can look at that as well. It's like, well, this is the layout, this is the course that I've set up, so I'm going to walk down this path and do it anyway. So I do try to look at those hooks, and I do try to say, like, okay, how can I get involved in the story? How can I be a part of what's going on, even if it's kind of going to be against my alignment? And what that winds up doing is that can wind up building in another flaw that can wind up exciting the story, because now all of a sudden, as opposed to, what, you did this thing that you really shouldn't have or didn't want to do, how does that going to inform the future story? So that becomes exciting to me. There was a time in the not too far past where I, as the player, really had no desire to open this, black puzzle cube that mysteriously showed up on my character's desk. But I knew, like, all right, the DM put that out there because my character is good at investigating. He likes puzzles. And you know what? This is going to be part of the story arc for tonight. If I just put that box down and walk away, as the player, it may or may not open. It may or may not have, dire consequences. Who knows? But if I walk away, I'm not going to be the one who did it.
Yeah.
But as the player, I know that's where the story is. So you know what? I feel compelled that I need to investigate and I need to open this. And you know what? It opened, it summoned a monster. I let stuff out. Bad stuff happened, and I got to deal with that. Now I have, a guilty conscience over, the suffering that happened because of my actions. So this goes back into what you're talking about. This was the yes and or the yes
Hmm.
but, depending upon how you want to look at it,
Hmm.
as opposed to the nah, I'm just going to leave it alone.
Yeah. So I guess I have another question regarding alignment, and it kind of plays into parties in general. How you're talking, it's kind of a signal. Obviously, whenever you do something big, when it comes to kind of like blowing up the party, you want to have a little bit of buy-in or have players that trust you and you trust them. But the idea of having a chaotic evil or lawful evil party member, but keeping that secret. So for me personally, I think the use of alignment, if you use it commonly, people are going to want to know what your alignment is in between sessions, or if you use, like in older editions, use spells to see that. I feel like that takes a lot of air out of the narrative balloon when it comes to trying to do that and like laying these seeds for 20 sessions in the future, having a character. I mean, I think one of our best examples is from Dragonlance, like Raceland.
Hmm.
Like he's not necessarily like full betrayal, but he's not a good dude. But he has goals that are aligned with the rest of the party, and especially aligned with his brother. Like that's the big deal that keeps him in there. So to me, these alignment spells and these abilities to see people's intention in their souls, just kind of given to just about anybody who can cast a spell, really brings down our creative avenues. It limits us in our narrative structure. I like Fae being able to do it because that's kind of what they
Hmm.
do, like pixies and things like that, being able to see the true intentions of people's hearts. But I also see that as a good narrative, being like, why are you with this guy? Like he seems to be like a terrible person. Everyone's like, what? Like, I don't know. What do you think?
All right, so there's a couple of things to touch on there. Number one, I think Raceland is an ideal example of someone to point out, how you can adventure with someone who's evil, and he is a perfect character to look at because especially early on. Now, I've only read the original Chronicles. I
Hmm.
haven't read the later stuff, but I've been gaming long enough that the stories get out, and I know what
Yeah.
his arc is.
My
Um,
entire backstory with Raceland and that entire party is vicariously through a friend who's like rabid about it. Like he's super excited, so he's told me everything. So I haven't read it personally, but I probably know quite a bit about it just because of him.
So you've got a character, a wizard who is evil. He's conceited, and he has the desire for power for just about everything else. But he also loves his brother, especially early on. So he's willing to kind of push his ambitious nature aside to adventure with his brother and everybody else. But he doesn't care about them. They can all die as far as he's concerned, as long as he and Caramon continue on. And if you guys happen to know more, and I'm wrong, feel free to argue with me or disagree in the comments. Because like
My
I said,
my
I
my
only
my wonderful community so far is not they get the intention. They get the intention of making games better. So you don't have to worry about
uh,
that.
well, that's fine. But he is a great character because there's times where he is really showing multiple alignments based on who he's interacting with. So that's where the alignment system breaks down because you're talking about a character in a novel who
Hmm.
is more than just a character sheet. Now when you break down you know the the I had 2 points
You're
based on
good.
what you said,
You're
and
good,
I
man.
can't remember the
It's
other part of what
it's
you're
why
saying.
it's why I keep a notepad because that lets me go back to points. But I'll jog your memory a little bit. How's that?
Yeah.
So, and I think that's ultimately the crux of the point of why I have like let's say 90% jettisoned alignment out of my games is because that I feel the narrative restrictions that come, and I'm all about restrictions when it comes to narrative. I think you become more creative the more restrictions that you put on yourself. But when it comes to alignment, I think it's done in a negative way, nuance in all things. And that this restriction makes it to where you can't pivot. It makes it more difficult for a character to change, and it creates a lot more arguments on what people think their character is and what the DM thinks their character is. There's a lot of I have found that like you could go 10 sessions partying, in a party with a character and everybody's having a great time with it, and then just someone brings up, it's like, hey, I'm just curious, what alignment is your gnome? And they're like, chaotic neutral. And it's like, what? And like, this just creates this huge argument because like, you haven't been playing chaotic neutral at all. And it's just like, well, it doesn't ultimately matter. You've been having fun, right? So what is that? What does the two words at the top mean? Well, nothing.
So, from the narrative perspective, you're absolutely right. Go ahead and chuck out that alignment, and we'll call to task if something really seems off, and if all of a sudden your character starts, acting in a way that doesn't make sense. But that can always be, just like any other, problem at your table, that can be, started off with just a conversation. It's like, hey, did you know that, your character started off doing this and he's now doing that? Are you looking to do something different? Did something change? In the real world, things happen.
Mm-hmm.
And, we can be changed. A single act, a single comment from someone has the capacity to send us spiraling, in the good way or bad way, into an utterly new direction for a person. Now, you could have the weight of events, finally be like, all right, that is the last stone for me to emotionally carry. I'm breaking down,
Mm-hmm.
and this is now my new mindset. But these are great things that you can have conversations with your GM about and be able to say, hey, look, I've been having fun with this character, but I want to do something new. Can I make this twist? Can I make them go in this direction now? And though, if you've got a great DM, they should have no problem saying, sure, let's see how we can work that in the story and see how we can either, take you further down that path or get it course corrected based on what you want to do. My cleric in my current game, he's 19th level, and over the last several levels, he's been a good cleric the entire game. Well, he's being tempted by some dark powers who are, like, hey, it's not quite a warlock pact, but it's like, almost. And it's like, I'm going to offer you some extra powers based off of, these things that are going on. If you use them, you get access to more. If I don't use them, things stay status quo. And it's been interesting. And, I don't think there's enough time to get it corrected. So I don't know, I don't know whether he's going to wind up becoming a villain in the world or whether he's going to, have to, take himself out of the picture and, go on some kind of holy pilgrimage to purge these evil powers from him. But it's been a fun journey, and it wasn't something that I would have ever really planned for the character.
Yeah.
But the DM put it out there, and it's like, well, this is a fun twist. Let's do it.
Oh man, I entice players all the time with warlock levels for the exact same thing. It's like, you telling me I get an all-powerful NPC that can mess with you on a daily basis for the promise of power? I'm down.
Yeah. I didn't even get warlock levels.
You just got power. It's cool.
I just got power. So he added, there's one of the deep magics. It was void magic by Kobold Press.
Yeah, good stuff.
And I really like it. So he wound up offering me first. It's like, you got access to both the void feats because you did this one act. And I'm like, okay. Well, then I used it. And he's like, all right, now all of the void spells, they're going to count as additional domain spells for you. You can prepare them as you will, when you go to pray. And
patrons hijacking on the divine weave that's coming to. It's like, yeah, I'll throw a couple in there. What's up?
And that's exactly what it was. And it's like, it was really really cool, and he hasn't done any kind of alignment shift, but there's some npcs that are now a little bit worried, and they've actually talked to some of the fellow in-game pcs to be like, hey, be on the lookout, I'm a little worried about this guy.
So the last thing that we really haven't touched on, maybe a little bit, but I think is an interesting point, is villains and their alignment. And I think in D&D we generally have a problem in, especially with the alignment and gamification, that villains are very one or two dimensional in their idea of like, why are they evil? Why are they doing what they're doing? It's like power, wealth, and like these aren't inherently bad things. And I can understand when you have a focus on the party so much, as opposed to other mediums rather, that you can actually like take episodes where you focus on the villain. I don't like doing cutaways in my D&D because I think that's really jarring, because it's about the players, right?
Right.
So you can't really explore without heavy exposition on a villain, right? It's much more difficult. There are ways to do it, and I've done it before. But it's very difficult, and especially if you don't like a political campaign, it's very difficult to get those feelings across. So, like, how do you deal with alignment? And the example that comes to my mind, just because it's what I'm playing right now, I'm playing Spider-Man on PS4. And one of the villains, I'm not a big comic book guy, so a lot of this stuff is, somewhat new to me. I never heard about Mr. Negative. But in the iteration in this game, Mr. Negative, he runs a criminal organization that is like brutal, killing people with heavy weapons and like RPGs in the middle of New York and like assault rifles, and just murdering people. Which in Spider-Man, I was like, whoa, that's a lot of murder. That's crazy. But on the other side, when he's not his Mr. Negative persona, he runs the largest homeless shelter in the city. And he feeds these people, and he does all this great things for the community. And it's his idea that comes from his upbringing that it's all about balance. And for every ill deed that I have to do to get what I need, I have to do something great for people, because if I don't, I'm a terrible person. But if I balance these, and to me, that's such an interesting concept that I think alignment kind of ignores, is somebody who does something because they believe it's the right thing. So at some point, like, what is alignment? Is it what you believe you are? Or is it how does the universe see you? Because Mr. Negative probably sees himself as a force of neutrality, or maybe
Right.
even a force of good because he might do more good. But where we see he's clearly a villain, right? Because he does these terrible acts. And, that's kind of where my headspace is when I think about villains, is why would they undertake such horrible acts? What are your thoughts on that?
All right. So first and foremost, when you talk about villains, I think it's also good that you want to incorporate the same mindset when you're looking at foils as well. It's not all about just the big bad,
Mm-hmm.
and you don't always have to have your foils and your adversaries, your villains, be evil. It is completely fine to have someone who feels that they're on the side of right and does those good deeds that you're talking about, but because of something in the past, they feel that I'm still at odds with you. And case in point, my wife and I are rewatching Star Trek Deep Space Nine, and in one of the episodes, Major Kira's friends are getting killed, and it turns out it was, spoiler from this, show from 15 plus years ago.
I think we'll be all
Uh,
right.
there's a Cardassian who was a servant in some, major captain's house that got, scarred,
Mm.
and he's all messed up, but he was killing specific people that were a part of this raid.
Who could not, people who could not keep up with the Cardassian.
Wrong Cardassian. Car
Continue.
so he enacted this, this strategic assassination of these, five people, six people who had done wrong,
Mm-hmm.
to him. And from his perspective, he was seeking justice. He didn't, you know, you know, kill with abandon. He strategically
Mm-hmm.
assassinated, these individuals. He says I could have blown up the whole station. I
Mm-hmm.
could have blown up the whole house, just like you did. When you set off that bomb to kill one person, you killed 23 servants alongside him, you know,
Yeah.
and she justifies, well, I was this, I was that, and I still don't feel I did anything wrong.
Yeah.
So here you can have both people who feel that they were standing on high moral ground and hadn't really done, anything, really great or really horrible, you know, or they've done both,
Yeah.
depending upon how you want to look at it.
Yeah, but
So
it reminds me of the film Law Abiding Citizen, if you ever saw that one.
if I did, I don't remember it.
Yeah, Jamie Foxx is in that one. Basically, the dude was wronged and was killing people from prison that put him in prison. But
Okay.
it's a really good film. Check it out. But
Absolutely.
yeah,
It boils down to, you can have somebody who is willing to do exactly what adventurers do, and consider, and be considered a good guy. So when it comes down to, either, the final fight, and you have that conversation, or coming out through investigation before you lead up to it, that might change your final confrontation into, well, this needs to be a conversation, and see, as opposed to it being a battle, like how can we pay reparations,
Yeah.
how can we solve this without further bloodshed. So that's the real fun, is to putting forth a villain who, is actually on the moral right side, or has the higher ground to be like, look, you did more wrong than I did. And that's going to come from players who are making awesome backstories,
hmm
or that are, willing to give you enough detail, as give the detail to the GM, and be like, hey, use this as you will. Because I guarantee you, when they started writing Deep Space Nine, oh, well, Major Kira was just part of the resistance.
Yeah.
They didn't have all of the history figured out. So when you decide, hey, I was part of this freedom fighting force to try and free my fellow citizens. All right, well, we'll get into the details of what you did later, and that can come out in the story and make for, really cool stuff, as you see in, shows and TV.
Yeah, it's a good example of reaping unintended seeds as they kind of flourish, and going back to those. And I always try to tell people, it's like, don't forget all the stuff that you mentioned in sessions 10 ago, 20 ago, because sometimes you can use a lot of that again. But I think we've hit pretty good bedrock here. This is another one of those like super vapory concepts. So I don't think that you can ever get like to a solid answer in this. But for you, what do you think a closing statement for? Remember our original question of purpose of alignment. Yes. If you can sum it up in a small conclusion of what it means to you and how you think your perception of it can make other people's games better.
So alignment does boil down to that, how does it dictate to the DM or inform the DM what your general course of decision making is going to be. I feel that we are moving away from the necessity of an alignment system within D&D. In past books, it just really hasn't been there before. It's dwindling in the amount of page content, or content in the books. So I really think that we're going to move away, and we'll get something that's a little bit more narrative friendly in the future.
Yeah, for me, I think the purpose of alignment really depends on the type of game you're playing. If you're playing a super gamified game, I think the purpose of alignment is very simply the ability to easily signal that these are killable foes without any consequences. I think if you are playing a more narrative-focused game, that alignment is likely going to be a weight on your game, unless you can think of a clever way of using it. And of course, I'm biased to my clever ways, which is cosmic alignment. But I think, as always, you can have fun with the way that has been doing well at your table, but always take in consideration of how you can be doing things better. Don't stop thinking about these concepts just because it's the way you've been doing it. I want to thank you so much, Nerdarchist Ted, for coming. This was awesome. I really had fun, and I hope you had some fun.
I did have a lot of fun. Thank you so much for having me. Invite me back, whenever you got a topic you think that we can jam on.
Yeah, man. We'll have you. We'll have you back. That's going to happen. Thank you, everybody, for watching. It's been great and having a lot of fun. And if you're not already, which you should be, if you're not watching the Nerdarchist, they upload all the time. Great content, especially for new DMs. They throw out a lot of stuff. And if you really want to tweak your character sheets and your characters to kind of get that nth degree, making those characters better, those guys are really good at that. So if you need some tips and tricks, those are your boys.
Thanks.
All right. I will see all of you guys later on the next one. Bye.